Got a secret, can you keep it? So a few months ago, Freeform, formerly known as ABC Family, finally released Cruel Summer, their latest entry in dark mystery teen dramas. Weirdly enough, there wasn't that much hype around it, but some people were really looking forward to seeing Cruel Summer, and I was not one of those people. Honestly, Freeform is kinda lucky this show turned out to be as popular as it is, because they did an absolutely terrible job at marketing it. It's kind of embarrassing how lazy that marketing campaign was. The trailers were boring as shit, there was barely any press around it, and they seriously struggled to build a real hype around the show leading up to its premiere. They also did a really stupid thing that marketing departments just need to stop doing. For some reason, Cruel Summer was mostly marketed as being a show produced by Jessica Biel. And for some reason, Freeform seemed to really believe this information was their biggest selling point, because that's all you ever heard about it. So much so, in fact, that there was a majority of people who had no idea what this show was about by the time it started airing. It was just known as the Jessica Biel show, and Jessica Biel isn't even in the show. It kind of reminds me of how the first season of 13 Reasons Why was pushed by Netflix as being a show produced by Selena Gomez, and nobody cared, and it took them forever to be like, okay, but we should probably also tell them what the story is, and then they started truly putting an emphasis on the show itself like 2 weeks before it came out. And I just don't understand that strategy. Trying to hype up a show by telling us some famous person is producing it is just not gonna have the massive effect you think it's gonna have on audiences. And I like Jessica Biel just as much as the next person, but I don't give a shit that she produced this show. If you want me to sit down and watch it, tell me what the story is, give me a good hook, tell me what I have to look forward to if I tune in. It's all that really matters. The fact that Jessica Biel is the one who did the most press to try and hype up the show instead of the actors themselves kind of shows how Freeform dropped the ball with their marketing campaign. They really botched it with this one. But eventually, the show started speaking for itself, and I noticed people online talking about it more and more. And while I had absolutely no intention to watch this show at first, I got a little curious, especially because people also seem to be very divided about this show. Some say it's freaking amazing and they love it, and others say it's boring, uninspired, and easily skippable. There's no general consensus there. The opinions are all over the place with this one. Now, if you don't know, despite its laughable marketing campaign, Cruel Summer ended up being the most watched series on Freeform ever. And yes, that's including the cultural phenomenon that was Pretty Little Liars, which is relevant because anyone who has heard about Cruel Summer knows that these shows are very similar. Because yeah, a lot of people, including in the media, have been running around referring to this show as the new Pretty Little Liars. I mean, it makes sense, the premise is sort of similar, the setting is sort of similar, some of the characters are sort of similar. I think it was impossible for this show to exist without being compared to Pretty Little Liars. But is it a worthy successor? We've established in my video about the show that Pretty Little Liars is not very, good, but no matter what I have to say about the quality of the show, there is no denying that it has a bit of a unique place in pop culture. It really did impact teen shows of the era and kind of redefine the genre in some weird way. I mean, hell, Freeform themselves have desperately been trying to remake something as big as Pretty Little Liars ever since Pretty Little Liars started in 2010 or something. There was Ravenswood and The Perfectionist, the two spin-offs that bombed and were cancelled in their first seasons. Then there was that Twisted show that was also cancelled halfway through its first season. There was The Lion Game, which got the axe in the middle of season 2. Like, they really tried to replicate that success, and it seems like Cruel Summer becoming what it is now proves they finally cracked the code, maybe. So I guess that's the question. Do I agree that Cruel Summer is the new Pretty Little Liars? Can this show square up against the juggernaut that was PLL at the time of its run? Well, surprisingly enough, yes, it can. And I do agree. To my big surprise, Cruel Summer is a show that takes all of the potential Pretty Little Liars had and wasted for 7 years, and it actually does something with it. It actually taps into that potential and does something really effective. If I'm being honest, this show is kinda cool. It has its issues, quite a lot of them, don't get me wrong. This show is absolutely not perfect, and we're gonna talk about that, but I can say without the shadow of a doubt that Cruel Summer is everything Pretty Little Liars should have been in theory. It kind of beat it at its own game. It presented an improved version of the formula, and I think that's why I'm fine with it existing. This show really shows to the audience what Pretty Little Liars could have been if Marlene King and her team of writers had actually put some real effort into their mysteries, instead of putting most of their energy in trying to convince us that a teacher grooming his student for 8 years and marrying her in the finale was romantic. There are a lot of good things about Cruel Summer as a show, but there's also a pretty big number of things that bothered me, and we're going to break it all down. But first, I just want to take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor, Adam and Eve. You already know who it is. I don't even need to introduce them, but I'm gonna do it anyways because that's how I roll. Adam and Eve is the #1 online adult store in the world. They're the best at what they do. Don't even start looking elsewhere. This is it. This is the place. And as you've heard me say before, the year 2021 marks the 50th anniversary of Adam and Eve, and right now, if you go to adamandeve.com and use code SPACE, you'll get 50% off of one item, and also, if you're in the US or Canada, you'll get free shipping. And hey, if you do end up getting yourself some stuff, you'll be contributing to a great cause, because 20% of their profit goes to fighting the spread of HIV around the world. And if you ask me, it's pretty freaking cool. So thank you, Adam and Eve, for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to Cruel Summer. So Cruel Summer is the story of Jeanette Turner and Kate Wallace, two teenage girls from a small town in Texas who go to the same high school but have nothing to do with one another on the surface. Jeanette is a shy, awkward, and nerdy girl that mostly keeps to herself and that people don't really notice. I know that because the show tries way too hard to make her a cliche to hammer that point in. Seriously, they try so hard to make her awkward that she comes across as a caricature.
Jeanette, right?
Yeah, I'm, yeah, Jeanette.
Anyways, Kate, on the other hand, is cool and popular, and people tend to gravitate around her. She's got mad flow, she's the Alison DiLaurentis of this show, but here's the thing. One day, during the summer of 1993, Kate mysteriously goes missing. Nobody knows what happened to her, nobody knows if she's alive or if she's dead. It's an absolute mystery. However, a year later, in the summer of 1994, it's almost like Kate never disappeared because Jeanette somehow seems to have taken over her life. She's completely transformed. Gone is the nerdy girl with glasses and braces. She's now fully glammed up and stylish as fuck, and if you ask me, she looks a little too much like Sarah Zed, but that's not the topic. Kate's best friends are now her best friends. She's dating the guy Kate was dating at the time she went missing, and nobody seems to know or understand where that change came from. Everybody seems to be keeping secrets. Something in this town definitely does not add up, but it all comes to a head when, on the day of Jeanette's 16th birthday in 1994, Kate is found alive and she returns home to take her life back. So yeah, I think it's really hard to look at the premise of this show and not think of Pretty Little Liars. And that's not a coincidence. Making the show this similar and banking on people comparing the two to make noise was very intentional on Freeform's part. I have no doubt about that. But while these shows sound very similar in concept, they are extremely different in execution, and this is where we start going into the details of the story. Starting with number 1. The good stuff. So I think the main difference between Cruel Summer and Pretty Little Liars when it comes to the mystery, I mean, aside from the fact that Pretty Little Liars takes place in present day and Cruel Summer is in the 90s, it's that Cruel Summer doesn't move in chronological order, or at least not exactly. Pretty Little Liars had flashbacks here and there, but the majority of the story just moved along from point A to point B. Cruel Summer, on the other hand, treats its timeline differently. It kind of puts a spin on it. The entire show takes place during 3 years. simultaneously. We continuously jump back and forth between the years 1993, 1994, and 1995. And if you ask me, I absolutely love that way of telling the story. I mean, yeah, the status quo of each year is a bit on the nose. Like 1995 is the everyone is emo year, and they go so above and beyond with it, but it's fairly easy to overlook that. For the most part, the three timelines work pretty well. They're actually very well written. Different years hold different pieces of the mystery, so you kind of find certain things out and get certain twists revealed to you depending on what timeline the show is focusing on. But all of them stay on track with the big picture, and it makes the following of that story so much more engaging. Something is going to happen in 1994 that doesn't make any sense, but later on it's going to be explained in a scene that takes place in 1993, which is then going to lead you to a twist in 1995. It's really clever, and it makes the mystery so much fun. And you can tell that, unlike Pretty Little Liars, the writers knew where they were going with their mystery and weren't just making shit up as they went. Because you can't really tell a story that way if you don't have a specific plan of where it ends up. Having three timelines at once that all move at the same pace together can easily get messy and chaotic if not done properly, but Cruel Summer pulls it off with a lot of skill. The show also nails the everyone is a suspect part of the story. Pretty Little Liars tried to make this a thing, but you just knew the writers would never have the balls to make the main girls villains or to actually commit to them doing horrible things with real consequences. So their attempts at building that kind of tension were always really empty. But it's not the same here. Cruel Summer does a really good job at making you question the integrity of everybody. You have no idea who are the good guys and who are the bad guys in this show, and it keeps the momentum going quite perfectly. People who seem really guilty might actually be victims. People who appear to be martyrs are probably not as innocent as they seem, and people who seem legit turn out to be covering for someone else. The writers do a really great job at keeping the mystery in a tightly constructed gray area, and despite other flaws in the show, it kept me hooked the entire time. And it's because there are layers to it. Like when you start getting real information after Kate is rescued, shit's really interesting. You see, it turns out that Kate was kidnapped and held captive by a man named Martin Harris, who also happens to be her school's vice principal. This entire time, she was locked in his basement. So she returns home after being rescued from him in 1994 after 10 months in captivity, but when she does, she refuses to talk to the police. So you start to think, maybe she's hiding something. But then when she does talk to the police, she seems genuine and she gives them a lot of legitimate information. Except later, we see Kate admit to somebody online that she hasn't been completely honest with her story, and her behavior becomes strange. It looks like she's trying to manipulate the story of her kidnapping, and at first glance, it seems like she's doing that to incriminate Jeanette because she wants revenge for Jeanette stealing her life. But also, we find out that Kate's trauma causes her to block some memories, and there are certain things about her time in captivity that she cannot remember. Mainly, there's a certain person named Annabelle that she mentions once in therapy, but she can't seem to recall who Annabelle is, even if she's positive that she met her for the first time while she was being held captive. The problem is that trying to remember Annabelle causes Kate to have panic attacks, and she can't get her memory to work it out. And I think that's what makes Kate such a good character in this mystery. There are several levels to her integrity. Her story and her perception of what's around her and what she experiences is multidimensional. So it makes it incredibly difficult as an audience to figure out when she's lying and when she's telling the truth. And as a result, it's impossible to know what her intentions are. She's a character that is specifically designed to throw you off as a viewer, and it works great. I think I liked Cruel Summer way more than I should have, and the reason why is because despite all of its flaws, you can tell this show is trying. It's trying its best to tell a story that is worth your time, and in the current era of mediocre teen dramas that try to get by doing the bare minimum, that's kind of respectable. The biggest reason why Pretty Little Liars is so frustrating to me is because it feels lazy. I already talked about it in my video on it, so go watch that if you haven't seen it, but most of the issues I have with PLL are a direct result of the writers trying to get away with doing the bare minimum. There is no effort there. The show is 100% designed to waste your time because they wanted to milk the show for everything they could get. They didn't actually care about offering a compelling story. But Cruel Summer is not like that. It has a lot of issues and all, but it doesn't feel lazy. It doesn't settle. You can tell there was a lot of genuine effort put into it. The writers are really not trying to waste your time here. They're not banking on never-ending build-up to stretch the story endlessly. It might be slow in some places, but everything that's happening in this show has a point. It has a specific purpose. Like Pretty Little Liars will give you 23 episodes in a season, but only 4 or 5 of them actually matter. The rest is just filler you can skip. But Cruel Summer doesn't do that though. The first season is 10 episodes long, but every single one of them matters. They're all important. They all have a very specific role to play in the story. You can't skip any of them. This show values its story and its characters, and it wants to do justice by them and by the audience. Sure, some of it is clumsy, we're gonna talk about it, but it's still worth acknowledging and appreciating the effort. Even if I didn't completely fall in love with the show all that much, I respect it. They actually tried, and that's more than I can say about most American teen dramas today.
Oh, just you wait. We're gonna talk about you.
And can I just tell you how much I love and appreciate that a mystery teen drama headlined by female characters is not bogged down by an excessive amount of romantic subplots that make the story way longer than it needs to be. It's actually refreshing to see female characters that don't need a love interest to function in this genre. It was such a relief to me when I realized they didn't care about putting that in the forefront. The show focuses on Jeanette and Kate first and foremost, and they make that very clear from the start. The moment I knew this show was going to be serious about its mystery was when the first twist was thrown at me. The first big twist of the show comes at the end of episode 1, where it's revealed that Kate was found alive in 1994, almost a year after she went missing. But 3 months after being found alive, Kate reveals while doing an interview on television that Jeanette saw her through a window when she was still captive and could have saved her, but she didn't and instead left her there to die. That is the moment I was locked in with this show. That moment alone created so many questions that drove the show so well that I just couldn't stop watching. Another thing I did not expect to like is the structure the writers gave to the story. You see, every episode of Cruel Summer is centered around one of the 2 main girls. One episode is going to be entirely about Jeanette, the next episode is going to be entirely about Kate, then back to Jeanette, then back to Kate, and so on and so forth. At first I thought this would make the show unnecessarily messy, but to my surprise it worked way better than I thought it would. I would be inclined to say that Kate's episodes are the strongest in the show, with some few weaknesses here and there. Jeanette's episodes are fine, they have their moments, but there's a lot about them that didn't quite work for me. I mean, aside from that god-awful wig she's wearing in the 1995 timeline. I mean, god damn it! Who approved this? Seriously, were there meetings about this wig? Jessica Biel, explain yourself! The reason why this structure works so well with this mystery specifically is that Kate's episodes and Jeanette's episodes have different functions. Jeanette's episodes carry the enigma of the story. Those are the episodes that are designed to make you ask questions, to make you doubt things. And Kate's episodes are the ones that usually answer the questions. There are some reveals on both sides, but Kate's episodes tend to be the ones with the biggest amount of information to piece the puzzle together, which makes sense because she's the one that went missing. And I like that. It's a different way to tell that type of story. That's what I mean when I say this show doesn't feel lazy. They really try to stand out and do something interesting and creative. Overall, I genuinely believe there are a lot of interesting and innovative ideas in Cruel Summer. The problem is that despite having good ideas, the show is not very good at executing them because yeah, like I said, there are a number of things about Cruel Summer that do not work, and it's only fair that I address that as well. Number 2. The bad stuff. So you probably understand by now that I have a hard time calling Cruel Summer a bad show. But while I have a hard time calling it a bad show, I also can't really say it's great because it's just not. There are a few things about this show that really really hold it back, and it's very hard to ignore them. The first thing that I dislike about the show, and probably the biggest bummer of them all, is the dialogue. To be blunt about it, the dialogue in Cruel Summer is atrocious. To the point where it's kind of funny, which is a problem because this show is not trying to be funny. It suffers from that syndrome of teenagers who do not talk like real people at all, and conversations that just feel unnatural and needlessly contrived. And I know this is just what you have to expect from American teen dramas, but still, a lot of it feels forced and it's a little distracting. The show also relies a bit too much on exposition in the dialogue to work in certain places, which is always awkward when your dialogue is not that great. If you don't know, there's a specific type of weak dialogue that people call as you know Jim, and it's that type of weirdly forced interaction we've all seen where characters in a conversation will randomly state information to each other that they both already know because the writers need to tell the audience but they don't know how. A bit like this.
Can you believe it's almost been a year since Kate disappeared? So sad.
I didn't really know her.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You didn't start kicking it with us until after she went missing.
There's absolutely no reason for these characters to tell each other any of this. The only reason they do is because the audience needs to know these things. It's just bad exposition, and it makes the dialogue feel really unnatural because people just don't talk like that. And unfortunately, Cruel Summer does that quite a bit. But yeah, overall, the dialogue is just laughably bad, and there are a number of examples for that. Some of the lines in this show are just unbelievable.
Quit stalling. We should go now. I want to ride the Gravitron before it gets too pukey.
The acting is also a problem that I had trouble getting past. I'm just gonna be honest, it's rough, it's not great, and unfortunately, you notice it a lot. Not everyone is terrible. I'm specifically thinking of Olivia Holt. She's pretty good, she nails her part. But the reason I bring that up and the reason why it stands out so much is because a lot of the show revolves around very specific confrontations that change the course of the story and influence certain events. There's a lot of people arguing in Cruel Summer, a lot of very dramatic emotional bursts. But unfortunately, a lot of it kind of falls flat because those big confrontational scenes are ruined by a combo of bad dialogue and bad acting. Not only is it a bummer because a lot of those scenes become repetitive, but it also makes a lot of the big moments in the show quite underwhelming. In a way, you could say it's a cruel bummer. I came up with this joke this morning, but it was right after I woke up, so I will not be taking full responsibility for that. And by far, the worst offender when it comes to acting is the character of Mallory, Jeanette's best friend, who is played by Harley Quinn Smith, the daughter of Kevin Smith. And yes, her name really is Harley Quinn, it's not a joke, you can stop typing. Mallory, unfortunately, is an important part of the show, and it's annoying because this character sucks, and I can't stand her. She was quite irritating, and yes, the writing and the dialogue play a big part in it, but I think it's mostly because Harley's performance as this character is unbelievably bad. And you guys know that I don't really like to single out bad performances and criticize them, but there are some instances where I feel like I have to, because otherwise it wouldn't be fair to the other performances in the show. The acting in Cruel Summer is pretty rough, but Harley Quinn Smith really stands out here. Every single one of her lines is delivered in such a weird way, it made me cringe at the end of my seat.
Hey, so we're riding bikes and I just really have to pee, and Jeanette said that maybe I could use your bathroom. What the actual hell? I want to ride the Gravitron before it gets too pukey.
I'm Kate's dad.
I'm Mallory. Hardly anyone knows who I am, and I love snacks. No, but my Uncle Rick did take me to a Hole concert last summer, and I got contact high. It was mad crazy. Mr. Harris caught me. I got detention. Known as literally the Kate Wallace fan club, with the exception of one person, a psycho bitch from hell, Jeanette.
I didn't say anything about Vincent.
Got it. Are you sure you're ready now? Don't let that stupid letter push you.
I flushed it.
All of it?
Yikes. The characters as a whole are all really boring and severely lack any sense of charisma. Most of them are just bland regurgitations of stereotypes we've already seen a million times before. Kate and Sarah Zed are interesting because of the mystery surrounding them, but on their own, they're not all that interesting as characters. Mallory is just the worst. This guy is just the stereotypical black gay best friend character I always talk about that just never matters in the story. I've seen this show twice in the last 3 weeks and I still can't remember his name. Jamie has an interesting arc that challenges his morals as a person, but he has no personality, so after a while it just feels a little boring. Martin Harris is an effective villain, but he was funny to me because this character just feels like he was designed to be what Ezra Fitz should have been in Pretty Little Liars. They even look the same. It really feels like Freeform was like, hey, we know we really fucked up by letting Marlene romanticize that one groomer. So as an apology, we clone him in this show and committed to him being an asshole. Sorry, bestie. The other characters were fine for the most part. Angela was fine. Derek was fine too. This dude is your typical high school star athlete, turns out to be secretly gay trope from literally every teen story ever told. But at least he's not a bully, so there's that. I don't think it's possible for any character to have less personality than these two. She could have been interesting, but in the end, she just felt like an underwhelming copy and paste of characters I've already seen 1,000 times before. The only character I genuinely liked and felt something for was Jeanette's father. God, I felt bad for this man. He's a good guy who's just trying to be a strong support for his daughter, and it costs him everything. He lost his job, he lost his reputation, his wife walked out on him and their children when everything started to go down. He's about to lose his house because all the money he has goes into paying expensive lawyers for Jeanette's case against Kate. Like, he's ruined. And when I say he's ruined, I mean that both financially and emotionally. He's completely depressed and he has no idea what to do. And what I like about his arc with Jeanette is that he's not just a blind parent who believes in the innocence of his daughter, no questions asked. The reason why this whole thing takes such a toll on him mentally is that he doesn't know if Jeanette is innocent. He's not actually certain that he believes her. And that's a terrifying notion for him as a parent because there's a chance that he's putting everything on the line for someone who is guilty. But then again, it's his daughter, his baby, so if she turns out to be guilty, would that change anything for him? Would it stop him from still putting everything on the line to protect her? I really like that concept. Not knowing completely fucks with his morals and it causes him to grow distant towards Jeanette. He doesn't like being around her. They used to be pretty close, but now he has trouble looking at her in the eyes. But still, regardless of all of that, he will do just about anything for her because it's his baby.
Are you even on your own side?
Obviously.
Well, it's hard to tell the way you've been treating this case like it's that Algebra 2 class you tanked.
This has been hard for me.
It's been a real picnic for me.
The flashback where he realizes that Jeanette had a key to Martin Harris's house hidden in her room is genuinely heartbreaking to watch. Because that's the moment he understands that his daughter is not at all the person he thought she was. She's not as innocent as she seems. That's good stuff, man. I don't know. I think Jeanette's dad was a really good character. I really enjoyed watching his arc unfold. But overall, the characters of Cruel Summer, while all serviceable to the story, are just not all that memorable. Some of the choices in characterization are also really off and weirdly exaggerated. That's specifically true in the 1993 timeline of the show where the characters are the youngest. They're like 15 years old at that point, but the writers make them act like they're 7 and it's really funny.
Play hide and seek in an empty house.
Not it! You're it! I hate you guys!
Like, dude, they're 15. They're not in preschool. What the fuck? Anyways, you get the point. Flat characters with bad dialogue and flaky acting for the most part. Not that great. I would also say after my second watch that I think Cruel Summer is a bit too long. The season is only 10 episodes, but it drags a bit in some places, and there could have been a way to tighten everything into 8 episodes instead of 10. The pacing of the show is a bit off at times, and some episodes episodes have some really pointless sequences that try to build tension but really fail at it. I'm especially thinking of a sequence in episode 5 where certain characters are walking through a fun house at a town fair. The scene just goes on forever. It's so long and it doesn't actually lead to anything. Like, nothing happens in this scene. You can tell that was the director trying to pull off a horror sequence, but it's so not scary that it just felt like an unnecessary sequence with no point. Like, around episode 5 or 6, the season started to feel a little long and I started to wait for the show to just get to the point with certain things. And some of the drama that can be shoved in there at times could have been avoided very easily and the story would have been better for it. Because there's something that Cruel Summer does a lot and I gotta point it out. I am a bit sick and tired of teen dramas having a character walk in on people making out or having sex as a plot device for manufactured drama. It's such a lame trope and it always feels so forced and tacky and I can't help but roll my eyes at it when it happens now. I'm mentioning it here because Cruel Summer has an episode where this happens like 3 times and it's really stupid. But when it comes to the narrative, I think the most controversial part of the show all stands in one very specific place. And there is a lot to say about it. Number 3. The ending. Now, I gotta say that for a while, I felt quite conflicted about the ending of Cruel Summer. There are a lot of reasons why, but I had quite the internal debate about it in my head, and at first, I couldn't figure out if I liked it or not. I even talked to Amanda the Jedi about it because I knew she had seen the show before me and I wanted to get her take on the ending because I still wasn't too sure where I landed on it. But now that I've watched the show a second time, I think I sorted out my feelings. The reason why the ending of Cruel Summer is so weird to me is because there are elements of it that are genuinely awesome, but there are other elements that are completely stupid. There are a lot of layers to the ending of the show, so it's a bit more difficult to wrap your head around it than it would be for like Pretty Little Liars. But at the end of the day, I would say that despite being a well-crafted mystery, Cruel Summer doesn't quite stick the landing, which is unfortunate as hell. I was rooting for the show, I really wanted to love it, but I think the ending just has one too many things that I can't get past that kind of fuck it up for me. Let's take a look at it. So the whole mystery of the show has 2 primary twists that reveal the big picture we've been looking for from the start. The first one comes at the end of episode 7, where it's revealed that Kate was never really kidnapped by Martin Harris, but she actually went to his house willingly after she had a fight with her mother that turned violent. Kate's big lie was that she said she had been held captive the entire time, but that's not true. She wasn't a prisoner at first, she was just living at Martin's house in secret. He actually tried to get her to leave, but she didn't because she officially became a missing person about a minute later, so she decided to keep hiding at Martin's house to not raise any suspicion. And after weeks of living with him, they eventually developed a romantic relationship. Oh, what's that? Oh yes, it is yet another American teen drama that features a major romantic relationship between an underage protagonist and an adult character who works at their school. At this point, it's just a very gross and disturbing tradition, and that's actually the reason why I solved it. I figured out the twist about halfway through the show because this idea of having the teacher fuck the student was just too predictable, and so I kind of guessed that's where they were going. But yeah, long story short, Kate went missing on purpose. For the first 4 months she was missing, about half of the time she was gone, she was actually just chilling at Martin Harris's house. She could have left any day, she just didn't want to. Letting people believe she was gone and left town was just all part of the plan. Now granted, Kate is a victim. Martin Harris groomed and manipulated her vehemently. He made her feel like she had to choose between being with him or getting to live outside of the house, and because Kate is a teenager and easy to influence, she believed staying there and going along with the plan was all super romantic. However, over time, she started to doubt him, and Martin realized Kate wasn't as easy to manipulate. He wanted her for himself. And on Christmas Eve, Kate snuck out of the house at night for the very first time to go see if her parents parents were doing okay, and he really did not like that. But when he began acting too controlling while confronting her about it, Kate realized she wasn't happy in this situation. She tried to break up with him, and he snapped. He couldn't control her anymore, he couldn't gaslight her anymore, and he realized that Kate leaving was not only a heartbreak he couldn't take, it was also a danger to his life and his career. By that point, they were just in too deep, so he snapped. He tricked her into going into the basement to grab her suitcase, and he trapped her in there. And only then did Kate become a captive, because she stayed locked in that basement for another 6 months. And all of that leads to the reveal that Jeanette was telling the truth the entire time. Kate was wrong about Jeanette seeing her in captivity. That never happened. What actually happened is Jeanette developed a habit of breaking into Martin Harris's house. She had been doing it for months because she loved the feeling of danger. She was addicted to the adrenaline rush. It kinda made her feel powerful. And a couple months after Kate went missing, Jeanette did it again, but she didn't know Kate was in the house. She ran out of there when she heard movement upstairs because she thought the house was empty. She never actually saw Kate there. It's Kate that saw Jeanette when she was hiding in Martin's house. But the thing is that Kate wasn't lying about what she said. She's absolutely convinced that Jeanette saw her through the window. And in the finale, Kate and Jeanette return to the house, and together they figure out that the person Kate saw looking at her through the window was not Jeanette, but her new best friend Mallory. Yes, this whole time Mallory was the one who knew Kate was at Martin Harris's house, but she chose to remain silent, and she then befriended Kate after she was rescued. And after all of that, we finally get the Annabelle reveal. So like I said earlier, there's this Annabelle person that Kate cannot remember meeting when she was in captivity. Well, it turns out that she doesn't remember this person because Annabelle is not a person at all. Annabelle is actually the name of a gun that Martin Harris owned. You see, after keeping Kate in his basement for so long, Martin's mental health begins to crash and he starts feeling an immense amount of guilt. So he decides to grab Annabelle the gun, go to the basement to apologize to Kate and tell her that she's free, after which he intended to shoot himself in the head before the police arrives. So he does that.
Sorry for the things I've done. For what I'm about to do.
Martin, please.
But the problem is that when he aims the gun at his head to put an end to it all, he freezes. He can't go through with it. He can't bring himself to pull the trigger. So he drops the gun and screams in rage and despair because if he can't take his own life, he's screwed. He doesn't know what to do. Unfortunately for him though, he is distracted by his own meltdown. Kate takes advantage of that moment of weakness, and before Martin can turn around, she quickly grabs Annabelle and points it at him. Martin is now at her mercy. She has the gun aimed right at him. He tries to talk her down and get the gun back, but Kate shoots him and he dies right on the spot. And this is why Kate could not remember Annabelle, because she subconsciously blocked the memory of killing Martin. The media only said Martin Harris died in a deadly shootout on the day she was rescued, so she, along with everyone else in town, just assumed it was a shootout with the police that resulted in his death. Now, those reveals are all fairly well executed. I liked all of them, and the show does a fantastic job at building them up through the season. For example, the very beginning of the show gives you this little sequence where Jeanette and two other people hear a gunshot at night. It's very quick and the show brushes it over, and you only realize at the end that what they heard was Kate shooting Martin on the night she was rescued. But by the time they get to that reveal on the show, that little moment is so far behind that you just don't remember it. So when they cut back to it, the moment Kate shoots Martin at the end of the show, it's like a punch in the face. It's a great full circle moment that's genuinely solid foreshadowing. The one plot hole about the Annabelle reveal is that it seems a little unrealistic that Kate would go months without anybody pointing out to her that she shot Martin, especially with everything happening. Kate constantly has to talk to the police, to her parents, and to therapists about detailed aspects of her story in captivity, and they all know she killed Martin, and she often has to talk about the day she was rescued. So the idea that this major event is never brought up to her over a year after it happened seems like a little bit of a stretch to me. It doesn't make sense that she doesn't know. And while I did like most of the twists in the finale, here is why overall I dislike the ending. With everything that happens throughout this story, with all of the major reveals and major secrets that are uncovered through the episodes, Cruel Summer falls flat because the ending is surprisingly devoid of any sort of consequences. Let me explain. I think Cruel Summer fucked up its ending because ultimately the show doesn't really commit to the fallout of the gigantic events that take place throughout the season. There are no consequences in this show. The twists are effective enough, but in the end, nobody actually has to deal with the repercussions, which renders the entire thing kinda pointless, and it was really disappointing. The show did a fantastic job at building the mystery up and making you want to figure out who is actually the bad guy here, and it works towards that the entire time. And then all of the stories converge into one, leading us to the big resolution of the mystery, but when the time comes for the big payoff, nothing really happens? Let me give you an example of what I mean. Like I mentioned earlier, in the finale, Kate finds out that Mallory was the one who saw her in Martin Harris's house and didn't say anything, not Jeanette. There's an immediate lead up to that confrontation, and it should be a significant one. This is one of the big reveals of the show, and it should be devastating for Kate, because Mallory is the first and only person she has allowed herself to trust and confide in ever since she escaped Martin Harris. She's her only friend. Their relationship means everything to her, and she learns that this one person she cares about knew where she was the entire time and didn't say a word. Not only that, but Mallory then let Kate believe it was Jeanette and encourage her to go after Jeanette to cover her own ass. Kate should feel completely betrayed and broken. Her heart should be completely shattered, and being consistent with her character, she should be insanely angry and seeking her own sense of justice, just like she did with Jeanette. But then, when she finally confronts Mallory about it, when they finally come face to face after the reveal, nothing happens. Mallory just sort of cries and rambles for a couple minutes and says she's sorry, and Kate is just like, okie dokie. And then they immediately move on. There's no further discussion, no fallout, no accountability, nada. They're just fine. And then they kiss and it's happy ending time and it's like nothing happened. But like, it bothers me. It feels so out of character for Kate. 5 seconds ago, she was ready to put everything on the line to destroy Jeanette's life because she believed Jeanette was the one who saw her. So why is she so chill about discovering it was actually Mallory, which is even worse because they had a relationship? She's the person she's closest to. Why is she willing to just let that go in a second? It makes no sense. It completely breaks the consistency of the character. It's like the show pulls a complete 180 on you at the last minute and it suddenly refuses to commit to its own consequences, and it kind of ruined it for me. Everybody just forgives everybody way too easily and it comes out of nowhere. This show did not deserve a universal happy ending, and forcing one in there was a really strange decision I did not vibe with. And all of that leads us to the single most controversial moment in the entire show. Number 4. The final twist. I'm not gonna lie, this is the part of my internal struggle that I had the hardest time figuring out. The final scene of Cruel Summer goes back to 1994 in Martin Harris's house. In the scene, we see Jeanette break into the house as she often does when Martin isn't home. As she starts walking around doing her thing, she suddenly hears a voice coming from behind the basement's door. The voice sounds terrified and asks for help. Jeanette is about to open the door until she hears the voice say, "This is Kate Wallace."
If anyone can hear me, it's Kate Wallace. Can you hear me?
Jeanette freezes, visibly shocked as she hears Kate tell her that Martin locked her in the basement and begs for whoever is behind the door to help her escape. She hesitates for a while, and then she lets go of the handle and gives us a final smile as she decides to not open the door. Basically, the twist confirms that Jeanette has been fucking everybody since the very start, and she actually did know where Kate was this whole time. In the finale, she wins because she got the best outcome she could possibly get. Kate Wallace herself declared her innocent. And now that Mallory admitted to having seen Kate on the infamous night that started the entire mess in 1995, nobody will ever have another reason to suspect Jeanette of anything. She tricked everybody by telling the truth, because technically she was innocent that night. She didn't lie about that. She never saw Kate through the window, but she did hear Kate through a door. Now, here's where I land on this after a lot of reflection. I thought I liked the twist at first because the scene itself is really well made, but the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't help but think that Cruel Summer's final scene was maybe taking it one step too far. I think that was one twist too many, and I actually believe that it undermines a lot of the themes linked to Jeanette's character in the story. Because up to that point, a lot of Jeanette's storyline in 1995 felt like a visceral commentary and critique of the media and how they will absolutely destroy somebody for doing something that no one can actually prove they did. In 1995, Jeanette is effectively labeled the most hated person in America. The entire country knows her name. She can't go outside without people heckling her. People keep vandalizing her home. She's the punching bag of the entire nation. Nobody knows if she actually did it, but it doesn't matter. Everybody acts like she did it because the media said so. It was weirdly topical, and I felt like that was very interesting as a commentary. So the shift was disappointing because Jeanette turning out to be innocent had a real impact. The final episode even shows the media doing a complete 180 after she proved to be innocent. She goes on the same TV show Kate was on in the premiere, and the same host who was happy to trash her for ratings is now acting like her best friend and confidant. And Jeanette then forgives Kate and says she dropped the lawsuit because she understands it was a misunderstanding and she never cared about the money and blah blah blah. Like, it had weight. It felt like an important closing act for the entire story, but then the twist just takes it all back for no reason. And yes, you could say that it was sort of foreshadowed. The show has a lot of moments dedicated to reminding the audience that Jeanette is a liar, but her being presented as flawed kind of just fell in line with her being a teenager. Like, it was consistent with her character without her having to be a villain. Her regularly breaking into Martin Harris's house felt like something she did to feel a sense of power and control in her life, which is something she felt like she never really had. And yes, some aspects of the twist do create a full circle moment that explains some of her behavior. Like, if Jeanette knew where Kate was this whole time, then the night they heard the gunshot, she probably knew where it came from and assumed Martin had finally killed Kate. Which is why when she learns that Kate was found by the police on her birthday, her immediate reaction is to ask where they found her body, because she was certain Kate was dead. And that also explains why she panicked when she found out Kate was found alive, because now she was officially in danger. Some of it makes sense, but also some of it is weirdly flaky. Like, when in the timeline did this twist happen exactly? How much time went by between the moment she heard Kate in the basement and the moment Kate was rescued? Like, how long did she know? I ask those questions because the show is always super specific when it comes to its timeline, which I appreciate, but then the details of that twist are just very foggy, and it puts a lot of the timeline back into question. And yes, the obsession Jeanette developed with Kate was creepy, but revealing her as a villain after everything that goes down in the finale feels cheap and weirdly tacked on. It's disappointing because it's the only twist in the show that felt like it was there just for the sake of having a shocking twist at the end. And despite the scene itself being really cool, I just feel like it wasn't all that justified. Again, it just felt like taking it a step too far, and it bothers me even more now because of my next and final point. Number 5. Season 2. This is the most discouraging part of it all, and I kinda hate it. I'm gonna be quick with this one because I just need to get it out of my system, so just bear with me for a second. Now, if you don't know, Cruel Summer was initially intended to be a limited series. It was supposed to be one season and done. But unfortunately, it became the biggest Freeform series of all time during its run, so Freeform decided to renew it for a second season anyway because money, and this is where it starts to really bother me. I am absolutely not okay with this show getting a second season. It does not make sense to me. This story doesn't feel like it needs a sequel. The problem with it is that season 1 kind of wraps up the story of every character that plays a part in the mystery with a good amount of finality. Moreover, the mystery itself is done. It's over. We have the answers. The show feels pretty complete, and so there's no reason for it to continue. Season 2 is now gonna have to make up a reason to bring these characters back into the story and keep it going. And that's gonna go one of two ways. It's either gonna end up like Pretty Little Liars, where they're just gonna keep making shit up as long as people watch it, and by 2029 we'll still be trying to figure out who was behind all of it. Or it's gonna end up like 13 Reasons Why and completely lose track of what it's supposed to be because the entire show had no reason to keep existing after its first season. And let me be clear, I'm not saying it's impossible to pull off, but there aren't a lot of shows that manage to properly go past their original intended story. Look at Pretty Little Liars, or Prison Break, or Supernatural. The second your show starts existing just to make money, it loses its heart and everything feels forced. And unfortunately, I have a feeling that every good thing about season 1 of Cruel Summer is going to be ruined in season 2 for the sake of milking drama out of a story that's already over. This show does not need a season 2. Look, overall, Cruel Summer is a series that tries to do good but kind of fucks itself in a number of aspects. It's not perfect at all, and I don't think I can call it a great show, but they actually tried and I appreciate it. It's a very flawed but well-crafted mystery, and I have to admit that in certain ways it is leagues ahead of other shows in this specific genre. It did subvert my expectations, it did prove to be underestimated in lots of places, and it really stands on its own. I gotta respect it, because unlike the CW, Freeform has been putting a lot of effort and resources into stepping their game up when it comes to their show. They're still not great by any means, but compared to where they were headed with shows like Ravenswood, Twisted, The Lying Game, or The Secret Life of the American Teenager, there's no way around it. They really have made a point to evolve, and that's cool. Gotta give credit where credit is due. You know what? I'm actually curious to know your thoughts on this show if you've seen it, because I was surprised at how divided the reactions were. It makes sense because, like I said, there's a lot of good and a lot of bad around the show. I felt somewhere in the middle with this one, so if you want to let me know your take, feel free to write it down in the comments. Anyways, I'm done. I'm gonna go watch Sex Education Season 3 now, so leave me alone unless you have popcorn. Also, I stand by what I said. This is Sarah Z. You can't change my mind.